I want to run through a quick install of Kali Linux. This will get us up and going with some of the tools that we need to start actually doing some break-ins. So this is sort of nearing the end of the tool setup phase that my videos have been in so far. So we're going to do a new machine, Kali Linux, and it's based on Debian 64-bit, what I'm doing. And we'll say next. How much memory? You want at least 1.5 gig, according to all the documentation I've read. I've got a machine with a lot of memory, so I'm going to pump this up to 4 gig. Recommendation is, or requirement is 1.5 gig. Recommendation is 2 gig or more. Like I said, I've got enough room. I'm going to create more. Create a virtual hard disk now, and VirtualBox dynamically allocated. All this is things we've done before. Again, from reading the documentation, the recommendation is 20 gig of hard drive space, not the 8 gig that VirtualBox recommends. I'm going to go with 24 gig because I had the space on my system to do it. That'll give me a little bit of leeway if I decide to install a lot of stuff into this virtual machine later, but at least 20 gig so you have room for everything. Now we'll go into settings. We need to look at storage. We have a empty IDE controller. For that we're going to choose our Kali virtual, our Kali ISO. So let me do that, and here we go. Choose that. Then network, we want bridged, not NAT. And that gets everything we have to have. So let's go ahead and start this up. Let me get ready to adjust my boot device. We'll boot off the CD and do a graphical install. From here it's pretty simple. You just follow along with the prompts. The operating system will start up here in just a minute. It'll give us some choices. I speak English, obviously. I'm in the United States. I use American English. The system's going to load some drivers it needs to recognize all the available storage, networking, get things ready so that you can actually do your work here. So that's all that's going on right now. It's looking to see, okay, it's got an IP address, it's connecting to the network. This shouldn't take too long. There we go. So I like to name my systems the OS dash and a VM, so we'll call it VM. Local domain. Doesn't really matter what you enter here. Somewhere along the way in my history of working with virtual systems, I picked up the habit of using local domain.local. I don't know where I get that, but I'm sure one of the tools I've used had that. So Kali's going to install, or going to set the network up, and it asks us for a root password. One of the things you can do here is not set a password, in which case the root account won't be operational from the start. You'll have to create a user account and do sudo for everything. I like to go ahead and enter a password. I don't use a real strong one, but it's one that I can remember, and it's a moderate password, I would say. But I recommend using a password and having the root account set up. Now I'm Central Time Zone. The next thing, we're going to do our disk partitioning. If you don't have any other reason to do it, just go with the use entire disk. I like to set mine up with an LVM, a logical volume manager setup, because that makes it easier to add more disk space in the future. So I use the guided use entire disk and set up LVM. There we've got our 24 gig hard drive. and I like to stick with everything in one partition for a virtual machine. If you're setting up Kali as your host OS, you may want to set it up differently, but for this virtual machine, go ahead and just stick with everything in one partition. System tells you it's ready to do this. Are you sure you want to do it? Do we want to write these changes and configure our logical volume manager? I say yes. The system comes up with the default. Since I made a 4 gig memory system, it's going to set up 4 gig of swap, and the rest will be available as storage space for my OS. So finish partitioning, write changes to disk, and are you sure you want to do it is basically what this screen says, and I say yes. Now the install starts. This takes a few minutes. I'm going to go ahead and cut the video so you don't have to listen to me jabber during the install. It'll take about 4 or 5 minutes is all it takes, but I'll stop the video and come back when it gets to the next step in the installation process. And we're back from the install. All the basic file system stuff is set up. The next thing Kali installer asks is, do you want to use a network mirror? What this is about is once you're installed, you can update packages and install things either off the install CD or from the network. If you choose to set up a network mirror, then you can get patches and updates. Otherwise, you're just stuck with what's on the install CD. So you want to set up this mirror for basically any kind of install. I don't know why you wouldn't want to set it up, but there may be a reason. But I'm going to say yes to set up a network mirror. I don't use any special requirements to access the network, so the system's going to pull down the files it needs to configure the network mirror here. This just takes a few seconds. It doesn't take that long. As soon as I say that, 1.5 minutes remaining shows up. Usually it's pretty quick. I think my network has slowed down a little bit here tonight. Looks like the kids may be downloading stuff or something. This is another one where it looks like it's going to be a while. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, wait for this step to finish, then I'll pick back up. And back again. The install has finished, so now the operating system is configuring the package manager, getting things ready for us so that we'll be able to do our updates and installs of packages in the future. The next thing, installing Grub. That's the bootloader that allows the operating system to boot up. Really not sure why my system is taking so long to do these installs. I have done this in the past to practice this and get ready for this, and it has never given me a countdown because it's never run this long. Anyway, the Grub bootloader setup is pretty much automatic. Everything has already been determined, and so it's just doing this, and it's saying, do you want to install Grub to the master boot record? That is, do you want Grub to handle what operating systems can boot? Since we're in a virtual machine and Kali's the only thing we're loading, I'm going to say yes. If you're doing a dual boot system, you might not want to do that. It depends on how you're doing it, but that's something that doesn't matter for this virtual system because it's the only OS we're installing. So what device do we install to? Well, Dev SDA, that's the only one we've got, and that'll set the system up to run and boot up Kali whenever we turn on the virtual system. Finishing up the installation. This also doesn't take that long normally. It's doing some last steps before putting together the final boot information, and then we'll reboot and be into Kali so that we can look around and see what things are going on. Installation's complete. Reboot our system. Say okay. System cleans up, removes some things that aren't needed after the reboot, and then Kali will restart the machine, the virtual machine. So let's just wait a moment and watch that happen. See where we end up. Well, okay, so it takes a little while. I've done this and just couldn't remember how much it took, so my apologies for making you wait on that. We'll get through this and get Kali up and running, and then we'll call it a night on this video, but I just wanted to show how easy this installation is. We're going to be using Kali to break into some virtual systems that we've installed, such as that virtual server or virtual Windows XP box that we created. So that's why we're waiting for this to finish. That's why I wanted to show the setup of Kali. There we go. Rebooting. Since I didn't change our boot, it'll boot off the hard drive now, and we just do a Kali boot. I'm going to move this machine up here because you're going to get some errors during boot up. That's totally normal. Let the system start up. Now we get our login screen here. So I set up root password, so I'm going to log in as root. And here we go. We've got our Linux system set up and ready to go. I'm just going to pop over here to the applications menu real quick so you can see how Kali is set up. The application menu already has a lot of the tools installed and organized information gathering when you want to find out about the system you're attacking. Most important early on is going to be Nmap, but we'll look at some of these other tools another time. Vulnerability analysis, web application analysis, and so on. These are the tools that come with the system by default. There are more things that we can install, and since Kali is based on Debian, we can also install anything Debian offers. So we'll look at that another time. I've got a couple other virtual machines to set up. I may do videos for them, or I may just set them up and offer to answer questions without going through the setup. But once I have those set up, then it's time to start breaking into computers and learning a little bit about how we do some penetration testing stuff. So I'm going to call it quits for now. If there are any questions, put them down below in the comments, please. I'll do what I can to help you get things up and running, and offer whatever information I can. The one last thing I want to show before I go: when I downloaded these Kali Linux ISOs before, I said I would show you how to check them, and then I didn't do that. So I want to do that. I have directories in my downloads for the various versions of Kali that I've pulled down. I am running this one, Kali Linux 2017.1-AMD64. So let me go into that directory. Now, there's the ISO. To check that you got a good download and verify that you got what the Kali.org website is trying to offer up to you, all you do is run SHA-256 sum and then the name of the ISO. So Kali Linux 2017.1-AMD64.ISO. Because it's 2.5, almost 3 gig, it's going to take just a little while to run. But once it finishes, what we'll get is an output string that should match this, which is what's on the Kali Linux download page. So I'm going to wait for it to finish, and we'll be able to look at what the output is. There we go. You can read through the whole thing if you want to. What I usually do is check the beginning and the end and somewhere in the middle to see if they look the same, rather than reading everything. But you see we've got 49B1C5, which matches the beginning of this, 49B1C5. We've got E11AE09 in the middle, and that matches here with E11AE09. And then it ends with 11E9D, 11E9D. To truly be careful and make sure you got the right thing, you want to check the entire string, but I figure checking about a third to half of it's probably good enough for most users. So there's debate to be had about that, but I'm not going to get into it. That's all it takes, is running that SHA-256 sum on the ISO file and then comparing the output. So I wanted to do that before I forgot about it again, since I forgot it in my previous video. I'll offer to help with any questions that you may have just put them in the comments. Let me know if there's anything I can do to make things a little easier to follow. Thank you very much.